Well, as I say in the beginning of the book, well, I mean, even when I was diagnosed, I noticed that, I mean, I had spent many years teaching medical students about breaking bad news, how to have these conversations. So when it was happening to me, I, for whatever reason, in retrospect, I can't understand it, but I had symptoms, but I never really thought, consciously at least, that it was cancer. So this was a total shock. I almost passed out when the doctor said, I'm not sure, but I think it could be cancer. I was overwhelmed. On the other hand, there's a little ethicist sitting on my shoulder saying, oh, he's breaking bad news. And observing it from that point of view. I don't know if that shows I'm crazy or what, but that was there. So, there was the professional side, and it was fascinating to be in the middle of things that I had been teaching about. And I learned so much about the reality of being a patient. I was invited to be in a trial, so I have a chapter in there about saying no to a trial, and why I did, and what I learned. When I was asked to be in the trial, it was after they had presented the tumor board recommended treatment, and then my doctor said, but there is this trial option my patients can take. So he described the trial to me. It was very clear, drew pictures. He was excellent. And one thing I know right away, I was desperate to start treatment. I had stage 3, 4. I had this tumor in my tongue. It was very painful. I could hardly eat. So I was desperate to start something. And I said, well, if I decided to go in the trial, it would probably delay my treatment, right? Because then I'd have to, this was just a preliminary discussion. So then I'd have to meet with the study person and be randomized and all. And he said, well, yeah, probably would. So number one, I didn't like that. And the second thing was the tumor board had recommended a very rigorous approach. They said if you weren't relatively young and in good health, we wouldn't suggest this. But it was 4 chemo drugs and then chemo plus radiation therapy. Very tough. One of the 4 drugs was a drug that had just been approved for my kind of cancer. The study had 2 arms, 3 cancer drugs plus chemoradiation, or only chemoradiation. And it didn't have that 4th drug that had just been, partly because the trial had been started 5 or 6 years before. You know how cancer trials are so long. So it made me realize that maintaining equipoise in cancer trials, you can't have precise, because with cancer there's all this new stuff and the trials take so long. So those were 2 amazing things I had never known about research that I learned from my personal experience. The idea in the trial was that maybe with less treatment, you could still have the same or equal or, I don't know, perhaps better outcome survival-wise, but also side effect-wise. Wouldn't be so burdensome. But here I am as a patient, I had survival, and I like to work out, I thought I was strong, I could take it, and my doctor had recommended this. So also this tension between physician and physician investigator. And as I wrote in the book, my perception when I said, I know I should probably do this, in my chapter I also write about this, did I have a duty to volunteer? Because obviously I knew the benefits of research. I said, I probably should do this, but I don't want to. And he looked at me and said, I totally understand. And he seemed relieved. So I think he really wanted me, and he's read my chapter and he didn't argue with me about that. So he was experiencing this tension that I had read about, that the physician investigator experiences. So it was just so amazing. Deciding what treatment to have. I wrote about refusing a feeding tube for too long and all these things. And so while I was sick, during treatment, I was pretty sick for some of it, but I had NPR on all the time. So these doctors came on and were talking about they were cancer doctors and they had become cancer patients, and they talked about how much they learned from that. And I was lying there in my half-conscious state of, oh, we could do that with ethics. I just think there's a dimension to when it becomes personal. Now, maybe if a doctor has somebody in his or her family, the very sensitive ones over time become close to patients, and I think they learn a lot that way, and maybe they listen to their patients. That's why we wrote the book. We hope that maybe some ethicists and clinicians, who read it would see that what they need to do. I think a lot of it is about, I wouldn't necessarily criticize clinicians and ethicists alone. I think it's whenever somebody has a profession where you have to deal with, I don't want to say work with people who are in very tough situations. In order to function, you put up these boundaries, and we even teach a course to the med students on professional boundaries, when it's appropriate to maintain them and what crossings are okay and good. So I think a lot of clinicians and ethicists, I see this all the time, and I just want to shake my colleagues. Oh, well, this is how we should do it, and I'm talking about beneficence and justice, and they don't want to open themselves up to the real pain, the real confronting mortality that people are going through. Susan Sontag, when she wrote her book on illness as metaphor, she starts out at the beginning talking about there's a kingdom of the well and a kingdom of the sick. And when you're sick, you're in this completely different kingdom. You feel very isolated. A few people, she didn't say this, but I know I felt that way, and my colleagues, we talked about that in the book.